Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, hopefully having an amazing day. In this video we're going to focus on AMD's RX 8600 and 8800 graphics cards, since there have been a lot of news pertaining to this upcoming series of next generation cards from the company. So yes, the names RX 8600 and 8800 have actually been confirmed, quote unquote, courtesy of, well, AMD actually. Their ROCm GitHub has actually listed these graphics cards, and you can see here, by the way, courtesy credit to videocards.com, who have managed to spot this, and you can see that near the bottom of the listing it states GFX 1100, which is for the 7900, GFX 1200, which is for the 8600, and finally GFX 1201, which is for the RX 8800. By the way, for those who don't know, essentially speaking, GFX 12 is representing RDNA 4, and GFX 11 is representing, of course, RDNA 3, and GFX 10 obviously is bringing up the rear with the 6000 series of graphics cards, also known as RDNA 2. But, as they say, wait, there is more, and we actually have some information concerning the performance figures of these next generation graphics cards. Now, there have been a lot of leaks and murmurs, including from myself, regarding the performance figures, but now we actually have some updates, particularly when it comes to ray tracing. So Zhang Zonghao on the Chip Hell forums is actually saying that AIBs are starting mass production in mid-December, but at the moment there are some quote minor bugs. So I'll be interested to know what those are actually about, so I'll try to dig around a little bit. But basically the power consumption is minus 25% versus the 7900 XTX. That's really good actually. The ray tracing performance in Biohazard 4, that's Resident Evil 4 if you're not living in Japan, is about 45% faster than the 7900 XTX. Now, of course, this does fall in line with a lot of the rumors and a lot of the speculation that we've been hearing regarding improvements in the ray tracing units of RDNA 4. And we've also seen some hints of that, of course, to the PlayStation 5 Pro. And they've also said that other mainstream games have been tested. Ray tracing is indeed an epic improvement. Oh boy, I think that's going to be part of the YouTube title. But the main reason is that it was bad before. I can't actually argue with that, actually. In short, it said that the raster ray tracing is basically an RTX 4080 or 4080 Super. So essentially speaking, that's actually a pretty large improvement in my personal opinion. By the way, as a small aside, I've actually heard that ray tracing is significantly better in the next generation cards. AMD are apparently trying to be a lot more, let's say, competitive with Nvidia, but that's probably a topic for another day. But another person, WJM47196, just rolls off the tongue, has also added that the frequency has also improved. So I believe that's regarding the clock frequency. Now, I have heard that these GPUs do go over 3 gigahertz, although the problem with those figures, I actually heard around 3.2 to 3.3 gigahertz, to tell you the truth, but I'm going to put a big asterisk there. I don't know whether that's actually A, legitimate, and B, whether that's like overclocked or what have you, because you know how it is, guys, like you can get a graphics card, you can crank up all of the sliders, and technically speaking it can run at that speed. So is that something that someone was like screwing around with internally and doing testing, but like, oh, it actually runs at this speed? Or is that just a bunch of nonsense? Or is it actually legitimately hitting that speed? And if it is the latter and is legitimately hitting that speed, is that boosted? I'm assuming that's not base frequency. As always, we'll have to wait and see. But regardless, it's going to be very intriguing. They've also added that the performance is always been the 7900 XT. Now, unfortunately, there is no caveat there to state whether that's ray tracing or whether that is raster. However, my guess, and yes, this is me sticking my neck out here, is this is raster performance, because if you've been watching the channel for any length of time, you'll know that I've mentioned about 2 billion times at this point that I've heard that the card is roughly on par with the 7900 XT. In some games I've heard it's XTX, but again, I think that might be a bit optimistic, but then again, who knows, with driver improvements and different games behaving differently on, well, different things, It's possible, but either way, I think that AMD are going to be doing some really good work with these GPUs. I've also heard, incidentally, that the die is really tiny for this. I can't get an exact number. However, I have been told that it's really small. I've heard it's below 300 square millimeters, but I can't get an exact number. I've heard that it could be significantly even less than that, but maybe potentially some people are getting mixed up between N48 and 44. But as always with this, we'll have to wait and see. If it really is that small, let's just say it's 278. Let's say 275. That would be really small, and I'll be very curious to hear what the pricing is like for these GPUs, because that could be very impressive indeed, my friends. I'll not cover the specifications as an overall, however, because we've spoken about them several times in the past. Of course, at this point, it seems that these specs are most likely correct, and of course, if they are correct, it'll be very interesting to see how RDNA 4 scales versus its predecessor in a like-for-like comparison. And the final thing I do want to touch on in this video is actually some stuff pertaining to Intel's Battlemage. Now, I'm not going to spend too long on this because all of this information is now, well, released publicly. But since I was covering so many of the leaks, I just felt like I had to cover this because genuinely, Battlemage actually has a lot of potential. So, basically speaking, the B580 is confirmed by Intel themselves to be starting at $250 US, or 249 to be precise, and it will become available on store shelves on the 13th of this month, actually. So, that's not too long at all. Meanwhile, the B570 will be available essentially a month after that, so mid-January, and it's going to start at $220 US. The specifications have also been confirmed by Intel. You can see on screen this handy-dandy slide that the company have shared. Basically, I won't go over all of the specifications here because you can pause the video, but TLDR 20XE cores or 18XE cores with the 580 and 570 respectively. 20 ray tracing units, so essentially it's a 1-to-1 for the RT and XE cores. And we have a clock frequency just a shade under 2700 megahertz, and of course 12 gigabytes of memory is also now confirmed, or 10 gigabytes if you're running the 570. And honestly speaking, guys, I actually am very impressed with that. Like, legitimately, I think that this is a really good, I think this is really impressive actually. Now if we look at a couple of benchmarks, and I do want to stress that at this point these are Intel internal benchmarks, so, you know, take with some level of salt. But basically this card seems to be nipping on the heels of an RTX 4060 Ti and is decently faster than a 4060. Of course, on a game-by-game basis, this could change a little bit, but this slide, best-in-class performance per dollar, and we can see that, for example, a 100% with the baseline of the 4060, we have the B580 being 25% faster in ray tracing, and that's pretty impressive. Again, if that's to be believed, the ray tracing units in this thing is actually really good. That is apparently a 9-game average, but this is taking into consideration the MSRP, so that is important to realize. This is not relative in terms of performance, it's basically ray trace. Sorry, it's taking into account performance per dollar, so it's not an absolute 25% increase in performance in ray tracing. It's saying in terms of performance per dollar, and raster is 32% faster again than the 4060. So I think that's pretty decent. We can get a better understanding, however, with some other slides that Intel have released. For example, it's saying it's 10% faster on average than a 4060, and here you can see a plethora of games. I'm not going to read out all of them. In some of the titles, there's a really big increase in performance. For example, Resident Evil 4, Cyberpunk, we have F1 2024, Diablo 4, and The Witcher are all doing very impressive numbers. On the other hand, other titles For example, Robocop, Rogue, City and Gears are actually doing not so well, actually. Now, there is possible improvements here when it comes to the drivers. Obviously, Intel have done a lot of work with the original Alchemist drivers, so it's going to be very intriguing to see how this actually performs. And indeed, if we just very quickly mosey on over to a tech power-up review, we can see, for example, the RTX 4060. In this particular review, I'm just going to focus at 1440p. We can see the 4060 here on average is getting, I'm just going to round up the figures for my sanity, 70 frames per second. Meanwhile, the 4060 Ti is achieving around 85 frames a second. So basically speaking, you have a card which is going to be decently faster than the 4060, getting close in some titles, in fact actually faster than the 4060 Ti, but with a decent amount of additional memory over the 8GB model. So is this going to be a perfect card? Probably not, but I think for the price, I can see it having a pretty good niche. It's going to be, again, very intriguing to see what AMD price both N44 and 48 parts at. With that said, guys, I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Bye for now.